New evidence is giving us a glimpse into the moments a Florida man found his daughter and 2-year-old grandson stabbed to death at their home. The horrifying discovery was made last spring. Sara Gamea and her 2-year-old son Ethan were found stabbed to death. Sara's husband, who is also Ethan's dad, was also found, and at the time feared dead, or so they thought. I'm Elizabeth Millner with Law&Crime. Now, this story is just horrible. Sara and her son Ethan were both stabbed to death, and the killer specifically stabbed Sara nearly 30 times. Now, authorities do have a suspect already behind bars, accused of the gruesome double murder. That's Sara's husband, Carlos Aponte. It was a 911 call no one wants to make, let alone a doting grandfather. Sara Gamea's father placed that call on March 26th of last year. It was a bloody scene as he reportedly described it, like blood throughout the home, but it was also terrifying, right? That's 3 bodies at first presumed dead. Sara's father reportedly told the dispatcher, "My daughter's been assaulted. I think she's dead. She looks like her throat has been slashed." He said during the call he was at home until about 2 o'clock the day before, and he was calling her all morning, but no answer. Whoever the killer was left the knife behind in the kitchen. During the call, he finds his son-in-law Carlos's body, at first believing he was dead too. He said, "They were killed. We think they were killed. Yeah, they were killed. Somebody killed them. Both are dead, and their son is missing." Sara's father then said, "Where's Ethan?" Frantically looking for the 2-year-old, he noted blood was just everywhere, to the point the dispatcher wanted him and his wife to get out of the home so they wouldn't spread evidence. When officers arrived, they did find Ethan, but it's likely a discovery that still haunts them. Sara and Carlos's 2-year-old son Ethan was found face down in a pool. The toddler had stab wounds to his neck and defensive injuries to his hands, which is hard to say. I mean, a 2-year-old having defensive marks on their hands, that imagery alone is enough to keep you up at night. So Ethan was confirmed dead. Sara too. Sara and Carlos did have a newborn baby as well, and thankfully the 4-month-old was left unharmed. But what about Carlos? So he was found in the primary bedroom. He was unresponsive, had a faint pulse, he was given Narcan, and was transported to a hospital. He was in critical condition, suffering from a possible overdose on drugs. So why was he filled with drugs and his wife and son were found stabbed to death? A little more into the investigation, detectives made a startling announcement. They're investigating the case as a double murder / attempted suicide. Always with the cases we cover, you always want to know why something like this happens. Not that it makes it any better though, right? A mom and her toddler aren't here anymore, and the person who is supposed to love and protect them allegedly is the reason they aren't. And it's still unclear what the motive behind the vicious stabbing is. Sara's father said he was unaware of any marital issues and saw them as a loving couple. Carlos did serve time in the military where he reportedly suffered a traumatic brain injury. That's what one of his fellow service members told NBC6 South Florida. Carlos reportedly sought help through the group Catch a Lift Fund, and he saw a doctor through the Veterans Affairs office. When he was seen at the hospital after he overdosed, nurses said it appeared he overdosed on several prescription medications. But there's still even more. While Sara's father didn't see marital issues, Carlos's arrest warrant paints a different picture. In one message allegedly from Sara, she wrote, "So let me ask you, when you went to Colombia for your dad's funeral, what happened there? Because there are tons of escorts there." Carlos allegedly replied, "I understand. I broke your trust." Sara responded, "You broke a lot of things. It's quite serious. You also broke our marriage vows." Carlos replied, "I'm not a good person." And Sara wrote, "And you're realizing this just now as your come to Jesus moment." Her search history showed more. She made searches like, "Just found out my husband cheated on me years ago," and "How does alimony work in Florida?" She even reportedly visited a divorce lawyer's website, according to police. Now, according to the arrest warrant, cameras in the home captured the couple arguing, and this is important. It happened on the morning of the murders. At one point, police say a woman's voice can be heard saying, "Because with your meetings and everything, you cannot have full custody. So I hope those videos and everything that you got and all that stuff from the Super Bowl in Germany where she was skinny and all that you wanted, I hope that she was worth it. Don't come after my money. Don't come after anything. And we should have signed a prenup. We should have signed one." Later, the cameras captured a child screaming and a voice yelling. So were the affairs and potential to lose his family in a divorce the reason? Well, it's still unclear. But Carlos was ultimately booked on 2 counts of first-degree murder. He was ordered to undergo a mental health screening, but according to online records, he was found competent to continue on with his case. And for now, until a trial is marked on the calendar, he'll remain in the Broward County Jail. I want to thank Odoo for sponsoring this news story. Odoo is an incredible all-in-one business management software that provides you with a range of applications. Another one of my favorite Odoo apps is their Projects app. Managing projects can be tough. But with Odoo's project app, it truly doesn't have to be. Need a clear timeline? The Gantt view maps out your tasks and helps you stay on track. Prefer a more flexible approach? Well, the Kanban view lets you move tasks easily from to-do to done. Or if you like structure, the list view gives you all the details at a glance. Plus, Odoo's comprehensive dashboard keeps you updated on task status, activities, and remaining time, so you're always in control. And with powerful reporting tools, you can track your project's budget, milestones, and profitability in real time. Odoo Project Apps helps you stay organized, meet deadlines, and boost productivity. So right now, you can get a free 15-day trial of Odoo's all-in-one business solution and see how it can really make your life easier. Scan the QR code on your screen or check out our link at odoo.com/LCNewsProject. The details of this case are just horrible, and you can't emphasize that enough. A 2-year-old found in a swimming pool with stab wounds. A mom stabbed in her home, allegedly by her husband. I'm joined now by attorney Melba Pearson. Melba, what's your take on this case, especially hearing what the victims went through?
Utterly heartbreaking, Elizabeth, utterly heartbreaking. Now, this is a case that's not too far from the place that I call home, so it's definitely really sad to see the coverage in the local papers talking about, this beautiful family that is now no longer with us, and now the defendant facing 2 counts of first-degree murder for ending their lives. Of course, this definitely brings to light, again, the importance of awareness around domestic violence, as well as mental health and the horrors of PTSD and traumatic brain injury that many of our service people who come back from tours in Iraq, Afghanistan, all different kinds of foreign wars, basically, they come back with so many scars that are both seen and unseen, and that we need to be doing more to make sure that our troops or anybody who is struggling with trauma is getting the help that they need.
And in your opinion, do you think, it was more of the traumatic brain injury, or do you think it was possibly, authorities haven't really laid out a motive specifically, but they've kind of been alluding to the fact that Sara wanted a divorce from her husband. He was cheating. She was making searches about alimony and divorce. Do you think that that also played a motive into what had happened?
Absolutely. Now, let's be clear. Multiple things can be true at the same time. So this could be a situation where somebody is driven to do very violent actions based on the fact that they're suffering from PTSD and a traumatic brain injury. We've seen that with Adrian Hernandez, many different, players in the NFL who have traumatic brain injury as a result of, repeated concussions and repeated blows to the head. It's the same type of scenario in terms of a lack of control over your emotions or reacting more violently than you would normally. So that can be true. And you can also be a domestic violence abuser while struggling with these issues. So it doesn't necessarily mitigate one over the other. It's just another way of explaining potentially how we got to this place.
And when you hear it wasn't police that found the bodies, instead it was Sara's father, so that's Ethan's grandfather, and he was the one making that 911 call, what goes through your mind? And especially, him being what appeared to be a doting grandfather, finding his grandson in the pool or investigators found the body, but in terms of just even finding his own daughter in their home, what are your thoughts on what he had went through when he made that 911 call?
I can't even imagine the agony that the grandfather is experiencing, just in terms of, number one, seeing what he saw, the trauma of seeing your daughter and your grandchild, both of whom you adored, meet this violent end. And then, of course, coming to terms with how they ended up meeting that end. And the fact that it was somebody you trusted, somebody who had been in your home, somebody that you've had a relationship with on some level for the past few years, and to see that they betrayed you in this way and took away 2 of the most important people in your lives. I can't even imagine that. And also, I can't even imagine the guilt he's going through in terms of, did I miss something? Did I miss the signs? Was there a way that I could have intervened prior to make sure that my daughter and grandchild were safe, or that, the defendant was able to get assistance, because clearly we need to intervene. We need to maybe have mental health personnel respond to the home, do what we call in Florida called a Baker Act, where basically you take somebody and get them treatment for maybe about a 3-day period of time, where basically it's not necessarily by choice, let's put it that way. So that is one tool that oftentimes families that are struggling with other family members that are dealing with either addiction or mental health issues, they often go down that route in order to make sure that the person gets the medical attention they need. So all of those things may be going through the grandfather's minds in terms of, what could I have done to prevent this? And the reality is, see, there's probably nothing he could have done, but that's very thin solace when you're having to bury your daughter and your grandchild.
And then, one of the big parts of this story is that investigators do believe that this was a double murder and attempted suicide. What are your thoughts? As Sarah, like we had mentioned, was found with multiple stab wounds. Ethan had multiple stab wounds, but Jean Carlos had prescription meds in his system from an apparent overdose. In terms of just him possibly wanting to end his life after doing allegedly what he had done, what are your thoughts overall?
Well, what I note is that it's very interesting that unfortunately both the victim in this case, the mother and her child, both sustained stab wounds. However, he decided to take the easy way out and take medication. I think that's an interesting distinction to note. I don't know how or the ways that it can be used in the future. It's just something that if I was a prosecutor in this case, I'm looking at that in terms of making arguments at closing that, listen, this wasn't a true suicide attempt, would be the argument I'd be trying to make. Now, of course, we need to see more in terms of medical records and additional evidence. So, let's be clear, this is not the end of the process, merely the beginning. But that would be one argument I'd be thinking to make, and seeing if I could substantiate that with the evidence as it is revealed moving forward as to why did you take a different method than the way you killed your wife and child. So there's that interesting thing to note. But also the fact that they sustained multiple stab wounds. There's several arguments that could be made with regards to that in terms of, number one, it was overkill. He was angry. If I can't have you, no one can. So there's that train of thought. But then there was also potentially, again, looking at the PTSD and traumatic brain injury aspect, TBI, that often can fuel you to be more aggressive and more violent than you normally would be. So that also could be part and parcel of the medical diagnosis that he has of both TBI and PTSD. Again, multiple arguments. There's definitely lots of evidence and aspects for both defense counsel and the prosecutor to work with in this case.
Yeah, and just, again, I can't emphasize the stabbing nearly 30 times. I think it was 28 specifically just for Sarah. And then baby Ethan, he had stab wounds as well, too, but then was just thrown into the pool where investigators say he drowned as well, too. So with all that being said and all that had happened, why do you think that he, being Jean Carlos, allegedly left his 4-month-old unharmed?
That is a mystery. And I don't know if it's a situation where, again, he was in a rage and was just very focused on those two. I don't know if it's a matter of the age. But then again, the fact that one child is 4 months and the other is 2 years, that really, to me, doesn't make that much of a difference in terms of that level of anger and violence. So I find that very curious as well and somewhat inexplicable. Maybe it was just a psychological thing. He couldn't bring himself to kill a child in a crib. But then again, you were able to bring yourself to kill a 2-year-old child. So it's just one of those things. I'm having trouble making sense of this. And of course, we never always know what goes through someone's mind. We can never, many times motive is not required in terms of proving it in front of a jury, but you have to be able to explain to the jury why something happened so that they can kind of get their mind around it and, apply common sense and life experience. So I'd be looking to figure out a way to explain that if I were, the parties involved in this criminal proceeding.
Yeah, and that's always the main question, right? Why does anything happen? We always ask that to ourselves, especially when it comes to these types of cases, like why leave a 4-month-old, but you still kill a 2-year-old? It just does not make sense. And, if this case were to go to trial, do you think that, the defense will go for an insanity defense, especially given Jean Carlos previously sought treatment for mental health? He was a part of a group that focused on mental health for military vets. He had that reported traumatic brain injury. What are your thoughts on the route the defense would take? And if you were his defense attorney, would that be the route you would go? though, not guilty by reason of insanity.
Absolutely. If I was a defense counsel in this case, I'd be trying to pursue a not guilty by reason of insanity defense, but I'd also be trying to plead this case out, because this is not a case you really want in front of a jury. Again, you can explain the TBI, you can explain the PTSD to an extent, but the jury will still have a hard time getting their mind around the fact that a child was killed in this whole horrible scenario. I guess I could see probably a scenario if it was, again, we've heard of veterans suffering from night terrors and basically waking up and attacking their partners in the middle of the night because they're thinking they're still at war. If that was a situation, I think a jury could be slightly more sympathetic, but that loss of the child is really the thing that I don't think the defense is going to be able to overcome. So this would be a situation where I'd be looking for a plea to second-degree murder and maybe 25 years in prison, something along those lines, just to be able to resolve the case, make sure there's some accountability for the defendant. And also, of course, it depends what the family of the victim want to see happen, being the grandfather or the father of the victim, etc. You have to take what they want into consideration. But that would be something along the lines, if I was defense counsel, I'd be seeking some sort of plea. Now, as a prosecutor, would I accept that plea or not? Different story. Again, I'd want to see a little bit more of the evidence to really understand the time frame in between the first and second homicide. Again, where was the baby left in terms of trying to understand his state of mind at that point? And again, looking at the level of drugs in his system to see if this was truly a suicide attempt or if it was just sort of I don't know what the right word to use for it is, but just sort of like a fake attempt just to be like, oh, yes, I'm really sorry for what I did, but I'm really not, almost to throw law enforcement off the trail. We've seen that happen, so.
And online records show he's now competent for the case to move forward after a judge ordered him to kind of go through the competency evaluation. He's charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, like we just talked about. But in terms of premeditation, do you think that this was a premeditated act? Do you think that he planned this out?
Again, is going to be based on the evidence. I want to look at his search history. I want to look and see if there's any possibility that he may have had access to her search history and knew that she was actively trying to leave him. That's going to be very important. I'll be curious to hear what she has said to friends and loved ones. Did she mention that one of the reasons why she wanted to leave is because the defendant became more violent, more possessive, things like that? Or was it that they had pretty much a happy marriage and this kind of came out of nowhere? But again, the fact that she's seeking a divorce tells me that there have been underlying issues for a while. The question is what? And, the cheating aspect is definitely something that has to be taken into account, because that can provide the motive as to why he would want to kill her. So again, it's all going to depend on the evidence as it becomes more readily available.
Yeah, and we'll wait and see how this all continues to unfold. Melba Pearson, thank you so much for your time today. I always appreciate it. Before we sign you off, though, what do you think will happen next?
Well, I think that the discovery process, which is the process by which, both parties reveal whatever they plan to use at trial, that's going to continue. And I think that's going to be very enlightening in terms of, how we got to this place and what were the underlying drivers that brought this horrible incident to bear. But of course, I just definitely want to encourage everyone, if you or somebody is dealing with domestic violence, is dealing with somebody who is returning, whether from war or some other traumatic experience, and is dealing with PTSD, please get the help that you need. There's, you can use whatever search engine of your choosing to find some resources, but definitely this is something that can end very badly. So please get the help while you still can.
And Melba, great words right there. Thank you so much again for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Carlos Aponte is being held with no bond. As of this recording, no trial date has been set in his case, but a calendar call, which is essentially a meeting between the lawyers and judge to talk scheduling, that's set for early June. Reporting for Law&Crime, I'm Elizabeth Millner.